resistance movement.
I think we should spare a lot of this morning's time for our guest who will be leaving later on to communicate to us a piece of his vast experience, as I have said. And therefore, once again, I must say that we are privileged to have you and we welcome you. And therefore, I take this opportunity and honor to call on His Excellency, the President of Uganda, to come forward and greet you and be able to invite our guest of honor for this morning to address us. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, Marimo.
That is why in 1989, in his capacity as National Political Commissar, and by the way, let me inform you, National Political Commissar meant that he was either number 2 or probably number 3 to Museveni himself. The rumors those days were that Besigye could be the next. So in his capacity as a National Political Commissar, he was in charge of the elections of 1989, which we called the Resistance Council elections, which you call local councils now, or local, some of you local. And together with the Minister of Local Government at the time, today retired Colonel Amanya Mushega, they organized those elections. Now, in that year, they were hosted to Uganda television, the only TV we had at that time, by the late Charles Kabuto Kabuye, who interviewed them on how those elections were conducted. So OwanaPaedia is taking you back to 1989 to give you a rare glimpse into the Dr. Besigye, whom you don't know. Just take a look.
I am privileged to introduce to you 2 guests. First, Dr. Kizza Besigye, who is the National Political Commissar and also Minister of State in the President's Office. Please welcome, Doctor.
Thank you.
And with him, somebody who is very much concerned in this program is Mr. Amanya Mushega, the Minister of Local Government. Welcome, please.
Thank you.
Dear viewers and listeners, last Saturday, the 11th of February 1989, throughout this country, except some very few parts of it, elections took place for RC 1 and 2. We want to look at what happened, the successes and difficulties, and then look forward to what is going to happen for the future elections upwards. Now, Doctor, when we talked last time here, we looked forward to, of course, some problems, but definitely we looked forward to success. Maybe you could give us a general picture about how you think and you heard how things went.
Well, actually, thank you. We didn't look to problems, we looked to only success. Problems could only come as a by the way. First of all, let me emphasize that the election that has just ended of RC1 and RC2 is envisaged to be the most important election in all the RC elections, because in this election, all Ugandans participate who are eligible to participate, that is, all adult Ugandans, actually participate in choosing some representatives whom they like. And therefore, it is considered to be one of the most important elections, because in any case, if you are not chosen by the residents in your village, you can no longer proceed to represent anybody at a higher level. The only exception will, of course, being the NRC, where we have allowed people to slot in.
Yeah.
So this is the most important election. Now, I'm pleased to say today that we have been getting reports from the whole country, because we established coordination centers, one coordination center in every district, which we announced that would be in the district administrator's office. And we similarly put a coordination center in the Ministry of Local Government. These coordination centers will be open throughout the period of election. We have therefore been continually getting reports at the headquarters in the Ministry of Local Government about the carrying out of the election, the success or the problems that were made in the election. And therefore we are fairly conversant with what happened countrywide. It is with that background that I'm happy to announce today that in the whole country, the election was very, very successful because the turnout was excellent in all parts of the country. The population responded very resoundingly. Everybody turned up, including the sick at some polling stations. They would try to find a means of going to these polling stations to go and vote for members of their choice. And the population was quite happy because from the reports we have received and from my own things that I saw at the day of election, because I moved around in Kampala, people were very, very excited and happy, saying they have never seen such a free and fair election, contrary to some of the comments that were being said by some of our friends. So the election was quite successful in that respect, that people really turned out in great numbers. In some areas it was over 95% turn up. And in the areas which were poorly attended, you at least found about 70% of the members of RC1 turning up. And definitely on RC2, RC1 to RC2 elections, we had 100% turn up because people did not have to go home and come back the following day. They stayed around and they voted, all of them. Therefore, for that particular election, there was 100% turn up. Therefore, the election to that extent was quite successful. Yeah. Of course, as we announced during the course of the election, the only place where we held up the election was in Gulu, and in that particular area, we shall be announcing in due course the program for their elections. But elsewhere in the country, the election went on very smoothly.
Thank you. Mr. Amanya Mushega, maybe you could, since you are the Minister for Local Government, maybe you could tell us which places did not have the chance to actually have the elections.
Thank you. With the exception of Gulu district, where the elections were postponed, not cancelled as some people are postponed. One, because the population is disturbed and displaced, so we thought it would not be wise to conduct elections when people are not in their proper centers. So they are postponed and they will be held as early as possible. Otherwise, in other areas, the elections took place as expected, and where there were delays in some logistical problems, they were completed the following day without any problem, and the returns from the whole country indicate that the elections were, on the whole, and compared to our turbulent previous experience, very smooth. I understand you yourself, you are a participant, so you have shared some experience with this. So we have had no hitches elsewhere, and even in Gulu there was no hitch, except that we found it logical and reasonable to postpone it until certain basic conditions are established and the people can exercise their democratic rights in a tranquil atmosphere.
Some time back, maybe I address this one to both of you. Some time back, some people threatened boycotting, and even an individual came up with a statement which was actually publicized quite a lot. I must point out that some people are a bit disturbed about the statement. I understand what I'm talking about. Do you find that this statement was completely ineffective, or you find that in what you have said, maybe there are some people who boycotted? What was the effect of that statement?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I think that the best person to answer that question is the person who issued that statement. I'm sure she has a very pertinent answer to that question. It was a very good thing that she issued that statement, because it was able to demonstrate whether there is anybody still listening to her or whether there isn't. And I think I'd like to leave the answer to herself and the viewers.
So as far as you are concerned, Mr. Amanya Mushega, would you think there is any reason for somebody to boycott such elections?
As far as we are concerned, there is no reason, but people who have their reasons, of course, are best qualified to give them. But in the first place, everybody was free to participate in electing. Nobody was bad. And in a few specific cases I mentioned in the statute, I think very isolated if you are in state research and if you are in NASA. I say, oh, you've been convicted. Not suspected of having committed a crime, but those who have actually been convicted by a court of law. Because in some cases, minor, I'm told they were trying to tell people who are suspected of having committed crimes not to participate. Otherwise, everybody was free to take part and to test his popularity and the popularity of his views. And so there was no need, and I think as from what the reports we have received, and personally I visited some parts of the East a few days before the elections, Kumi, Soroti, Kapchoru, Ambare, Tororo, Iganga and Jinja, and through Mukono, and we have got field staff. We have been also having people who have been moving to the field with the communication and with transport to check on the situation on the spot. And the report says that everybody has been participating, and therefore, if there was reason to call people not to participate, then it seems the people have not responded well to that alleged reason. And we are very happy with the outcome, and we are glad that the people have been able, through practice, to express their support for the popular democracy system.
Yes. Now, what do you so far receive about this section in the statutory instrument about campaigning? Our people are known to be very famous for campaigning for whatever they like. Do you think it was possible for technically to rule out that type of campaigning that is mentioned in the statutory instrument?
Well, it's not possible to rule it out, and that's why the regulations are put there, and why there is penalty. It's precisely because it's expected that even with the regulation, people are likely to try and flout them. Therefore, we expect that some people, and we are hearing information that some people are actually going ahead to flout those, to try and work in a manner that is contrary to the regulations as set out by going campaigning. We understand some people are giving money, some people are campaigning on party lines and so on and so forth. But as I said, we have a very elaborate system to listen, to monitor all these malpractices in the election. And as I had indicated earlier on, quite a few people will get very rude shocks because they are going on with the malpractices, maybe with the knowledge that, without the knowledge that they are being observed, but they are being closely observed, and at an appropriate time they will get an appropriate reaction. And as I say, some will really be very shocked. So these people who are going along to campaign and to do all sorts of malpractices will definitely be dealt with as the regulations stipulate.
I am directing this next one to Mr. Amanya Mushega regarding, again, connecting with the same point, the fact that, as you know, there are some people who never forget, even when they should forget. Now, there are some people who have been in the previous RC 1 to 5, but apparently some of them have not been getting on together very well. Now, these people, and I'm talking from hearing also physically from various areas, these people are actually started immediately on Sunday, bringing in the old approach about disparaging somebody in terms of malpractices or bad type of life which somebody may have had in the past. In some cases, completely untrue. In other words, okusiga enziro, so that they may make such and such individuals possibly come down. How, in your system of monitoring, I don't know whether that kind of thing is also very strictly being observed to try and find out such people who are bringing in the old type of, I'm going to use the word sectarianism here, to actually spoil the whole show.
Well, to add on to what my colleague has just said, we even have reports that some people are resorting, maybe that is a sign of weakness, resorting to the old lines, appealing to sentiment in order to get what they call automatic support. And the traditional lines they tend to appeal to. But also, as you know, transforming society takes time. You can't make the whole of Uganda turn around just in one night or even in 3 years. So some habits die hard. Now our purpose is to put in motion a system, one, that allows the good to come up and the bad to be exposed through practice. Two, to have regulations that do not allow bad elements to practice their evil with impunity. Because like now, if a person has lost, he doesn't expect to be disturbed by others. He does not expect repercussions to lose a job or to be harassed because of that. Because the regulations are in place and the culture of tolerance is also in place. But some individuals who may want to damage to undermine their friends, one, there are these observations and the regulations to be followed. Secondly, there is a resort to the courts, because they should not forget that the civil laws are there. If you tell lies about a friend, I think there are laws of defamation, there are laws of libel and slander, which the injured party can resort to on the individual basis. Those also are there, and the public should not forget, which can be implemented. And finally, there are also the regulations which are in place and which could apply to these individuals. And within the regulations which I think should be observed, one, the individual who is standing is given to a maximum of 5 minutes to talk about himself, which is quite a generous gesture. But also within the audience, they are even given unlimited time to debate the individual, which means they can refute the allegations of the individual, and it has happened in some elections, as you know. So, and from this election, we are also monitoring it with a view to putting in place better rules and regulations for future elections, so that they are improved and the bad elements are constantly and regularly decreased. So we are also observing it with a view to improving it, I mean Ugandans, at a future date. So they may help us actually detecting how far Ugandans have gone in improving in their methods of standing and electing their respective leaders.
Now, in the process of human endeavors, difficulties are usually expected. Dr. Kizza Besigye, maybe you could tell us what difficulties in your observations as the elections went on, which difficulties actually were met in the process?
Well, there were a few difficulties, as you say. First of all, we met difficulties at the level of supplying materials that were required for the elections. We had to distribute countrywide the required stationery, the forms, Form E1 up to E5, up to all levels that they were required, which meant they had to be ferried up to every parish of Uganda. We had to supply the logistical requirements, allowances for the election officials, and transport, and so on and so forth. And these could not be adequate in all areas at the expected time. There were shortfalls in certain areas. But these shortfalls have already been corrected. In some places they had to improvise. Where forms were not enough, they had to cycle style until they get the actual printed forms. So those were a few difficulties, but they were overcome in the main. And the personnel also, some people had underestimated the personnel requirement, so that you would find in a polling station where there are maybe 12 villages, more than that, you find there election officials, about 4 or 5 election officials, so that it would take a very long time to have one village elected and then another one come in and another one come in, instead of having enough election officials to carry out elections in all the villages simultaneously. And of course that one also could lead to another difficulty of some members behaving in and becoming manner, voting for this one when another village where they don't live comes, they may be also filtered in, and it might be difficult to isolate them in time. So there could have been irregularities as a result of these difficulties which were met at the beginning. But as I have said, most of these difficulties were overcome. Some of the difficulties which were more difficult to overcome immediately were the understanding of the regulations which we had. Right. Because sometimes as a result probably of the election officials not being conversant with all these regulations, you would find that at a polling station there is an official who is in charge but is not totally conversant with the regulations, and therefore could be led to make a mistake in the regulations themselves. And we have had to repeat some of the elections in certain areas, and we will have to repeat even others in other areas. Because, for example, the idea of the absolute majority, which we were emphasizing before the elections, was not observed in all the elections. We find that somebody, because he has had a clear majority in terms of lining, they see his line is definitely longer, though in the numbers, he is not beyond 50% of the people who have voted, but they would register that one as a winner, and that was definitely a mistake. In other areas, you would find that the election officials would not give time to the candidates to explain who they are, and time to be discussed by the voters, so that they exchange views. Somebody raises his badness, somebody maybe raises his goodness, so that they can compare notes and see whether he's the best man to put in an office or not. But again, what we need to do now is to emphasize that these regulations, they have been circulated very widely up to the RC ones, and what we must emphasize now is that they should be read very carefully, understood by all election officials, and the population themselves. If they have doubts, they should get a copy and read, because there is a copy at every parish, and there will be a copy at every sub-county. We have even advised that they put a copy on the notice board at every sub-county, so that everybody is conversant with these election procedures. Maybe I could take this opportunity, since you've asked about this difficulty, to explain, to clarify on some of the things which might be met as a difficulty in the election of the member of NRC. The member of NRC. One thing which I've heard that is unclear is that people are not aware of whether after electing the RC3 executive, whether those members or the members that would have been elected to the district council will be voters when it comes to the time of voting for the member of NRC. Now, we must make it abundantly clear that the people who will vote for the member of NRC are all members who are RC3 councillors. Now, RC3 councillors include the RC3 executive. They will also include the people who will be elected this Saturday that would have been elected to the district council. So if on Saturday, 18th, they elect you to the district council, it doesn't mean that the following Saturday you will not go to vote for the member of NRC. You will be eligible to go and vote, because you will still be a councillor of RC3, and therefore you should vote. Similarly, once they have elected this weekend, once they elect members to the RC3 executives, it means that they must be replaced in the RC2 executive. And whoever replaces them will also be eligible to vote. Therefore, for villages, for areas, for the parishes which are quick, they should organize elections to replace the members who would have moved from RC2 executive to RC3 executive.
Oh, they don't need any timing from government?
No. Because that is a by-election.
You better repeat that one.
That is
very, very important.
So it will be in the advantage of that particular parish and that county, for that matter, to have the people who have been elevated to the RC3 executive to be replaced in the RC2 executive, because both of those, the one who has been elevated and the one who has come in, will all be voters for the member of NRC. This should be made very, very clear. So that once they, on Saturday, once they have elected the RC3 executive, they should go back now and fill those gaps at the RC2 executive. The other thing which I would also like to clarify is the pressure which we have been getting on the civil servants wanting to go beyond. Civil servants wanting to go beyond the RC3 council. We have been getting pressure. They should be allowed to go on to the district, to other places. But we think that for the time being, let us observe what will happen with them stopping at RC3. Because there are pros and cons to the whole matter. We think that it is a disadvantage to have a public servant beyond the RC3 council, because after RC3 council, the work becomes much.
Oh yes.
And it can cause, it can divert you. Secondly, it can cause a conflict of interest because you would be a policymaker on the one hand, and on the other hand, you would be the one to implement it. You can imagine what would happen if the assistant agriculture officer in charge of a sub-county is also the secretary for mobilization. You know, he's supposed to mobilize himself and supervise. It can cause a conflict of interest.
I can see that, yes.
And thirdly, of course, they are liable to transfers. They can be transferred anytime. A public servant can be transferred. They don't have to ask you whether you are in an RC and take that into consideration. So it can cause instability also, and it's not good for us at that high level. And besides, all these public servants are ex-officials in these councils, and if you are a civil servant at the district, you are an ex-official in the district council. Yes. So if you have any positive contribution to make, you can make it in the district council still, nothing stops you. So we think that we should hold on for the time being at RC2, RC2 executive, which is the RC3 council. They should not go beyond for the time being. Let us first monitor how things go for the time being. So apart from this, there has been no difficulty in the election.
Maybe one thing which Mr. Amanya Mushega could comment on here, connected with what you were saying, is this idea of explaining the people. I think government was unfair to itself. Why did these records come out so late? And we were rushed when we have been looking forward to this exercise for such a long time. I was a bit puzzled about this. The instrument for these elections. It was rushed, it came out so late, and government was in this way being unfair to itself. That's why I think many people are not very clear about the kind of things Dr. Kizza is talking about.
We could say it wasn't long time, rushing is relative, because certain things have to be done, and we move on. As you know, the situation in which Uganda is not where you work with laxity and all the leisure that you have. And of course, we have also been having problems of people trying to manage things by crisis, and if there is no crisis, there is no movement. Some, of course, could have moved faster if everything put in place had been followed properly. I'll give an example. Some of the regulations were submitted early,
yes,
but you find along the way, some new thing has gone in either by omission or by inclusion. You find certain lays up and you have to correct it. So people actually behind the scenes, which other people of the public don't see, there are people who are working in the Secretariat, in the Justice, and in the Ministry of Local Government, almost 20 hours a day, going home at midnight and back at 5 to ensure that these things moved. So there was quite a lot of effort put in, but other people also not observing their ground. And also if the explanation that went on, people had paid attention, because those who are omitting these rules is not because really they have not had enough time. They were given 2-3 days much earlier than the election took place. They were read on radio. Every presiding officer had a copy. So the lack of seriousness also contributes to this, that some election officials really had ample time through listening and reading to have understood the simple regulation. They are about 32. They are not even simply written. They are not even written in a very complicated English or Latin. So that was not as bad as we thought. But obviously, we also learned some lessons, those who will be running the public affairs in the future, to ensure that there is what we may call adequate preparation. But even some of these people asking questions, the NPC has just answered, whether they should fill up. We have got, for example, been receiving reports. What do we do? Who is supposed to constitute the RC3? We've been practicing this for a long time, but in face of elections, people panic. They begin to ask questions which are actually obvious. We have also, in this exercise, if I may also comment on 1 or 2 items. One, we've been able now to get empirical data on how many administrative boundaries we have in the country, because the records in local government sometimes have not tallied with those in the field. So now this has brought up how many counties we exactly have, how many sub-counties, how many parishes, and how many villages. And this is very important for the planning of the country. It is going to be used fully. 2, people have learned that you cannot go around floating the law, because some people have been creating their own sub-counties, trading centers. Now that they have to participate in the democratic process, they are sending messages whether they could, now we could legalize some administrative units they had created for local convenience. And maybe I can also use this opportunity to make it clear to listeners and viewers and administrators concerned that if a local administration had created an administrative unit for their own convenience, not following the established procedure, it is up to them to correct it. We cannot sanction illegality. So they should go back. If they had created a Morga which was not there, it must work. If it was a trading center, which normally should not have been one, then it should go where it was before that administrative convenience had been done. Right. So that we have an up-to-date and correct way of doing things within the country. Now, on the civil servants, I wanted to add on one small thing. Some other people have been arguing that if you deny civil servants participate, then the parliament and our councils will be full of unfit people. Some even have argued that will be a council of houseboys and the rest. First of all, this is an insult to our people. All Ugandans have the right to participate and choose their leaders. So that should not arise. If our population is made up of peasants, they should reflect this. Either you should be a peasant or a representative who actually reflects the views, aspirations, and the requirements of the peasants. So this is very crucial. And the peasants should take this seriously, to choose people who represent their interests, where they themselves may not be able to come because of language and race like parliament. But RC1, RC2, why should a person move from Kampala, for example, and be a chairman, like my colleagues say, be a chairman, RC1 in Rukunjiri? Okay, you may be elected, but in practice, supposing you are not elected beyond RC2,
yeah,
are you going to be going home to adjudicate over land disputes, the cow having eaten a neighbor's garden, the one who damaged his neighbor's property, will you, and attending to their regional needs? So that's why the other throat in for going to NRC was put in, but it has not been also strictly observed. But our people say, well, these are our sons, they will come home and the rest. But we shall observe it at a later date. But it's important that the peasants the people choose people who represent their interests. And they are also free to come up. Knowledge is available.
Oh, yes.
And the civil servants are not the only people who constitute Uganda. There are many other segments of society who are not privileged, are not specifically mentioned. And they have the option beyond RC3 council to choose to remain public servants or to be fully engaged in RC work. That option is there. Right. They don't have to resign before. They resign after being elected. And even after they have stopped serving in RC councils, they still have the option to return to their old jobs, of course, taking into account what has happened since they went into RC system. Yeah, that's
Thank you. If somebody asked you a question, both of you, how long are the current leaders who are being elected going to be in those positions? In other words, 1 year, 2 years? What is the regulation about this? What would you answer?
Well, first of all elections that are taking place, all political activities that are taking place in the interim administration. And legal notice number 1, this part of the constitution which was being amended to accommodate the expansion and the fresh elections, clearly stipulates that there will be an interim administration of the national resistance movement, yes, which will not exceed 4 years. Now, that part of the legal notice number 1 has not been amended.
No.
And therefore, I don't know why. Because I've also been noting that there is apprehension. People are saying that we are now trying to take over the power of the people to elect president, to do what. All the activities which are being undertaken now are undertaken in the interim administration period, which is stipulated to be 4 years in legal notice number 1. I suspect that some of